we are episode 7, I believe, of the StackCast now. Today, we are going to speak with Fosse from Nano. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your relationship with the Nano project as a whole?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey. Um, I'm the developer of Nautilus, which is a nano wallet, right? And I'd say I've been in the nano community for maybe 2.5 years, but around a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, I really started like taking an interest in nano specifically, and like got involved uh with the development in the community.
All right. And kind of what drew you to Nano in the first place? I'm sure we'll get deeper into the details of that, but what initially caught your attention?
Yeah, so I think it's a pretty similar story for most people who get into nano, where they're like interacting with and they're using these other cryptocurrencies, and uh they get fed up with fees. And so naturally you're like, is this the only thing out there that has is this the only solution? And of course there's a million solutions to a million different problems out there, and so I'm looking for something without fees, and nano's like right up there. That's its shtick. It does that, and it does it well.
All right. And you say it does it well. So I've been so curious. I did a little looking into it myself, obviously, but how exactly is it able to do that? Let's go
So
there first.
yeah, so nano doesn't have any centralizing incentives. So with things like mining and staking, you have this like centralizing force over time, because as you stake, you gain more of whatever it is that you're staking. And with mining, you're if you're going to be mining at scale, like you need these large resources, and they centralize over time. And nano specifically does not have any incentives to give people um, that would result in like a monopoly of sorts over the currency. And so nano has really, really good um, decentralization factors. And what lets it be feeless is that it has really, really good spam prevention mechanisms. So that comes in two main forms. There's a small amount of proof of work that you need to do in order to submit a transaction. And this can be done locally, or it can be outsourced to a server. But it just makes it so that there's like a little bit of, it just adds that, like, a little bit of cost, a little bit of nuance to making a transaction, just so that you can't, uh, you know, just run a loop and have it run forever. Like, it'll cost you something. It's very minimal, but uh, it's not zero, right? And then the other thing that Nano has going for it is really, really well thought out prioritization schemes. So, and I'm butchering it here because while I'm involved with the development process of wallets and other community things, I don't work on the core protocol itself outside of like raising some issues. But how I understand it is they have this bucket system, right? And so if you have a lot of nano, and not even a lot, if you have like a few, you are in a higher priority tier than anybody else trying to spam the network. So transactions are prioritized by how recently your account was used, and the account balance. So in order to spam, and there's like 63 buckets. So if you wanted to spam Nano, you would need to have you would need like an insane amount of resources to span each bucket effectively. So spamming the lowest tier is obviously the easiest, but even then, the most effective way to do it is to have a million Nano accounts all providing transactions at the same time onto accounts that have not been used recently. So even if you amass this large number of accounts, you're still going to be put in these, you've used up your ticket, right? So anybody else who hasn't made a transaction today, they immediately cut to the beginning of the line, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's split amongst the balance tiers, and the nodes vote on each bucket in a cycle. So they go through each bucket for each balance tier, and they just go through that loop. I don't know exactly how often, but presumably several times a second, because the Nano's finality is quick, usually under half a second. So I don't know if I did a great job of explaining. So like, I'm open to like clarifying questions, because that was like kind of brain dump how my brain kind of sort of understands it, but I don't know if that comes across as like, tangible information that's digestible.
It's okay. I think it's understandable enough. And that kind of leads to another question that I had. How does running a node to support Nano work exactly? I know it can't work in the traditional sense. So how would that work?
So I'll answer your question with a bit of a question. So you're probably familiar with like Bitcoin mining nodes, right?
Yeah.
But those aren't actually the nodes that people interact with. And they don't have incentives either. The people who run the like when you're interacting with a Bitcoin wallet, it's connecting to a node that somebody, probably the person who made the wallet, is running free of charge. There's no incentive for them to do so. They just do it because they need it for the wallet to work. The mining Bitcoin is only, or the nodes that mine Bitcoin are only used for consensus, or at least as far as I'm aware, they're only used for consensus. So to sort of answer your question more directly, Nano doesn't have any direct incentives. Like, you don't get paid Nano for running a node. People run it because they either have a business incentive to do so, like you're running a service and you need to make transactions on the Nano network. It's in your best interest to do so. And the other way you can do that is you can just pay somebody else. Like, you can use an existing node if you don't want to have the infrastructure costs that come with it. But running a node is so low cost. It's very obtainable. It's not like an Ethereum validator where you need 32 Ethereum to in fact, you don't need, there's no stake required. You can run a node without any sort of it's called a non-voting node. Even as long as it's the specs are very, very generous. I don't know what like a good way to put that in terms of compute power, but like you can run one off of any generic laptop, if that. Like, there's no GPU required. It's just probably like an SSD, like preferably fast, but like it's not necessary. You can run one off of a hard drive, but like it'll take forever to bootstrap. And then just like a quad core CPU will be fine, which it's very, very generous compared to most other cryptocurrencies. Now, principal representatives are a different class of node, and for that, they like to have you set up a more like a beefier system, but that's optional. And for anybody just like running a service or whatever, it's completely unnecessary.
And then Nano is kind of advertised, so to speak, as being a more eco-friendly option. Could you maybe explain how exactly it earns that description?
Yeah, so the consensus used for Nano, it's called open representative voting, is just ruthlessly efficient. And there's no mining involved, of course. So the only power costs are the nodes themselves, and the small amount of proof of work, which there are plans to remove that entirely from the protocol. I don't think I mentioned that earlier, but you add those up, and it's I've seen like different numbers thrown around, but generally, power consumption wise, a nano transaction it's like 6 million to 1 in terms of power efficiency. But I don't want to like quote without sources. So like I don't know. I'll have to like get the sources for that number. Some people are like, no, it's like 8 million. No, it's like 5 million. It depends on how you calculate it heavily, but that's like being extremely like precautious in terms of like you just choose like the beefiest hardware and all the nodes, and you have really expensive electricity costs.
So one other thing I wanted to make sure and ask about too is I've been seeing a lot about Nano being described as an instant payment method, but you had also mentioned earlier about the kind of system of what's the right term here, of kind of moving to the back, so to speak, and then kind of waiting to be able to have your stuff go through first. Am I describing that correctly?
Yeah. So even at so say somebody is spamming the network, which could even be now. People have for the past like 5 or so months, somebody I don't know who has just been spamming the network for whatever. But it's the crazy part is that it's been ineffective. Like they haven't been able to affect, like nobody notices. You have to actually be looking at the thing and be like, oh, somebody's just sending nano back and forth and like in the block explorer. But to people actually using the currency, they don't even notice. And that's because of the prioritization system. So if
Thank you. That is
you
the word I could not grasp a second ago.
yeah, okay. So yeah, you're basically if you're assuming that you're not spamming the network, your transaction will go through instantly. The only time that the prioritization system comes into play is if the network is at saturation, basically, meaning that
Okay.
the nodes are all confirming transactions as fast as they possibly can, and then you are still being rate limited. So assuming that meet the criteria of you didn't send your transaction less than you didn't send another transaction less than 100 milliseconds ago, which why are you sending transactions that quickly? Like, what are you doing? Or your balance is high enough that you're just in a higher tier than the spammer entirely. Your transaction will be pretty much instant.
Okay, so that answers that. I was trying to figure out how to maybe make those two things make sense together, but that definitely bridges that. So thank you for explaining. And then hopefully this isn't getting too technical, but I also wanted to ask if maybe you could describe the kind of block lattice design. I was kind of reading a little bit about that earlier, but perhaps you would be able to describe that better.
Yeah. So, and I'm definitely not the best person to explain this because I have a bigger grasp on Nano's like structure than I do other cryptocurrencies. So to me, the Bitcoin structure is like the weird one. But how I understand it is that most other cryptocurrencies, non-DAG based cryptocurrencies, are a blockchain model where you have a transaction with multiple inputs and multiple outputs, which is like called UTXO or unspent. I don't remember what the
Unspent
acronym.
transaction outputs.
Yeah. Nano doesn't have any of that. It's I believe it's called an account based model, So you have an account, you know, you can have like 1 million different accounts per seed phrase, or however many you want to generate. And when you're signing a nano transaction, you are essentially writing to your own chain. And so it leads to this little bit of a quirk. So when somebody sends you like Bitcoin, you just have it essentially. Like it's, you know, assuming that you have looked at the most recent block height, you can see that they've added to your balance. With Nano, somebody has added a send block to their account saying, I've sent Nano to this address, but then you need to sign a receive block that says, I received this transaction. And so then your balance is spendable. So sending and receiving Nano takes 2 blocks.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard of anything working quite like that before.
I don't know if this is correct, but I believe it's a quirk of all tag based currency. I don't know. There's like some plans to maybe remove the receive block or automatic receives. I think they're called. So I don't know if it's, you know, guaranteed to be a part of the protocol forever, but I know that it was a design decision that the devs made because it is a DAG-based model.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you for trying to explain that anyway. You still have probably a much better grasp on that than I would, so I appreciate it. There seem to be quite a few really unique features to Nano. I know all the time if you ask someone about a project and say, what makes this stand out from others, you get a lot of the same answers, if that makes sense. But I'm not really seeing that as much with this so far from what I've learned. There's a lot that, at least for me, I haven't really seen repeated in other projects. So I was curious, are there any trade-offs to some of these technologies?
Yeah, so people like to cite the blockchain trilemma of like scalability, you know, speed and whatever, you know. I'd say Nano's biggest sacrifice, and it's an intentional one, is there's no smart contracts, essentially, and with Nano being so focused on being a digital cash replacement, the devs have taken like a pretty hardcore stance of, you know, as efficient as possible and like no extra data. So something that some people want to be included with the protocol, but you know the core devs disagree on, is adding a memo field. So, you know, on most blockchains you can add like a memo what this transaction is for. Nano doesn't have that. It's technically possible via like protocol abuse. There's a representative field that you can use in place of that, but it's like not defined. It's not standardized, because you have to like encode the text in hex or whatever. And it's not that those things aren't possible in Nano. It's that they see that Nano's efficiency is what gives it its value. And personally, I think those use cases can still be possible, you know, through some secondary layer. They just, you know, their focus is on making it as fast and feeless as it can be. I think that answers your question. I kind of like lost sight of.
It's okay. Basically, it was just about if there are any potential downsides that come along with any of the unique upsides of Nano.
Yeah, so there are like some efficiencies to be had in the UTXO model, but I think the upside is speed, which is what Nano goes for. Because you can have like, with a big block, you can just write 1,000 transactions in one UTXO block, and then be like, okay, that's 1,000 transactions in however long it takes to publish that block. But with DAG, it's one block per transaction.
And I'm just going to switch modes here really quickly because I've been really curious about this question and I don't know how to fit it in. So we're just going to go for it. Opinions on Banano. Go.
I like it. It doesn't take itself too seriously. The community is really nice, and they're much more willing to like experiment with like the Nano code base and like what's possible. I have a fork of my wallet, Nautilus, called Potassius, and I'm planning on adding NFTs to that once they so like they're like so NFTs exist in Banano right now, but there's not like a solid API for interacting with them. And so I'm waiting on the developers to like sort that out. And once they do, I'll add like a viewer to Potassius.
I was going to ask, is there any current way to actually view them right now?
Yeah. There's like a website, or there's like a couple of different websites you can go to, but it's kind of like scattered. It's not like it's not like OpenSea or anything like that.
And just because I probably should have said this a moment ago, just for anyone that wouldn't know this for some reason, and I wouldn't blame you for not knowing because I didn't either until recently, but Banano is just going to be a meme coin version of Nano, if that wasn't a little bit obvious from the name and the whole potassium theme. It's pretty funny though. Yeah, so is there quite a bit of crossover between the community around Nano and Banano? Is there, people just liking to maybe venture into Banano to just for the lulz, basically, but also still those same kind of features?
Yeah, so you see a lot of developers like build something out for Banano, or they'll like stumble upon Banano, and then they'll cross over to Nano, or maybe they don't. Maybe they just stay with Banano because they like it more. But the code bases are essentially identical. There's like, they changed like one thing. The raw amounts are different. But other than that, it's just like a name change. So if you build something for Nano, you just have to change like a couple of lines, and you basically built something for Banano as well. And so most Nano products and services have a Banano counterpart, and vice versa. Whichever, some come first. So for example, my wallet Nautilus is a fork of Natrium, which is a fork of Callium, which is a Banano wallet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
So and then my Banano wallet is a fork of Nautilus. So we've gone full circle.
Yeah. That is very interesting. And then to kind of switch here a little bit to something I actually meant to ask kind of in the beginning. I'm a little bit of an erratic thinker, so I apologize for that. But so when Nano was originally first being distributed, I was seeing, it seems there was no ICO or anything like that. It was just distributed through faucets, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I believe, and this is before my time in the Nano community, I wasn't around for this. I believe what they did is they had a website set up with a CAPTCHA, and you just clicked a button, or you put in your Nano address and you clicked a button, and it just gave you Nano. And then I believe maybe sometime in 2017, maybe 2018, I don't quite know. It started to get botted, and so they just burned the rest of it, and they left some percentage for the developers.
I did see the other day there does still seem to be one that you can use to get just a tiny amount to get started to play with.
So there are plenty of faucets out there that will give you small amounts of nano, but uh, the one that they used for the initial distribution is long gone.
Okay. So there are more
I
than just that one. I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, yeah. One that I like that's really, looks really nice is get-xno.com, I think.
Yeah, that I think that might have been the one that I tried out the other day. And then I did see there is a Banano. I can't remember what exactly it was called, but it's like every 2 hours, I think you can go and get more and more and more.
Banano has an ongoing distribution, if I recall correctly, and it's a lot more complicated what they have going on. Banano has a system. It's called Boom Pow is the service. Are you familiar with folding at home?
Mm,
The it's
no.
this it's this organization that outsources graphics cards, so like GPUs, to fold proteins for like cancer research and such. So what they've set up is a way for you to, I'm putting mining in quotes here because it's not like traditional mining where you're actually getting block rewards for solving a thing, but they essentially have like a developer folding at home account, and you can join their team to help with cancer research. And as part of their distribution of the coin, it goes, they distribute Banano to those who contribute to the folding at home project.
Interesting. Okay, that's a really interesting distribution model.
They also distribute through like games on Discord. Like there's like just a bunch of different like mini games, and it's like how they keep their, it's part of like the community engagement, I guess you could say. Um, I believe they've been doing it for since the launch of Banana, which I think is like 2018. And they're like set to do it for another like few years.
And speaking of which, when did Nano actually launch?
Um, so I know originally it was called Ryblocks, um, and I believe they rebranded to Nano in like 2018, 2017. This is again before my time, so I don't quite know the full history, but I think 2015 is like probably early stage, 2015, 2016, I think. That's just going off of like posts.
Let's see. And then to get a little bit more personal here, if you don't mind, how long exactly have you been involved now?
So like end of 2021,
Okay.
like fall or winter of
So you've
2021.
been busy since then.
Yeah.
Hasn't even been too long, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I look at the calendar and I'm like, oh wow, it's been a while.
Yeah.
2023 already.
Are you working on anything else nano related currently, or are you just kind of sticking around as an active community member at the moment? Where do you stand?
So there's a lot of like interested parties that have like come to me about various projects. One of those was stackwallet, and they're in a couple of them are still like in the earlier stages, and I can't quite talk about them. But what I can talk about is, no, I just shouldn't.
It's okay.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
pressure. But you have more recent projects in the works right now, it sounds like.
Yes. I just can't talk about them.
That's fine. That's fine. And then looking forward to the future of Nano, what is kind of the grand vision?
So there's been some developments lately. There was a post today, actually, or is it today or yesterday? I'm not, I don't quite remember. But the Nano Foundation partnered with this guy named Duncan. I don't quite remember his background, and they just recently announced that Trustable is dissolving, which is was their like FTX, like their foreign exchange use case. It was going to be an exchange and like on ramping and off ramping solution, but just due to like regulatory concerns, risks, and this is me just relaying a Reddit post essentially. So I don't want to get things wrong and just spew, stuff.
You're fine.
But like I'd say that like the overall goal or the vision for Nano is really the same as any other cryptocurrency. It's a cash replacement, a really, really good cash replacement. And in my personal opinion, those the two biggest contenders are Monero and Nano, because for like Nano just fills the gap that most other cryptocurrencies haven't quite met for certain use cases, specifically like in instant payments. Like I really love Monero. It's literally anonymous cash, but the only gripe that I have with it is that it's not as fast, and there's also something to be said about ecological concerns. But like in the grander scheme, I think those will play a smaller role.
And for anyone that might ask, are there any barriers against having a Monero-like level of security for a coin like Nano?
So there's actually a proposal by a Nano Foundation, an ex-Nano Foundation member, a while back for it's called amount privacy, which I don't quite know what that entails. It was very technical beyond me. It wasn't finished, but from what I gather, from talking to people, just like about the protocol and such, privacy in Nano is possible, but the Nano Foundation, if it happens, the Nano Foundation will be the people who develop it. Their focus is in, sticking to, Monero has a lot of like barriers to adoption because of its private nature, and Nano wants to avoid those. But I believe it is I believe it could be done protocol wise.
But there's no Monano type thing in the works.
Not at this time. not to my knowledge. If it exists, they're building it in secret.
Well, and then what was the term you just threw out? I apologize, I can't remember. For the feature that was kind of looked into.
Oh, amount privacy. So
okay.
Monero is like the gold standard of privacy. Like it has a lot of guarantees about what you know or what you cannot know about another person that you're transacting with. This was like the first step to privacy on Nano, is what he came up with.
Gotcha. Well, if anyone's curious about that, you'll need to look into it yourself just a little bit more, but apparently that's a topic to look into potentially anyway. And then I think we have a good understanding at this point of kind of what makes Nano stand out, but was there anything that you wanted to make sure and kind of add to what we've discussed already so that we don't leave out anything that could be really important for people to know about it that are not familiar with the project at all.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody watching or listening, I just like encourage them to give Nano a try. It's really magical, like to experience that instant transaction, especially if you have like two phones and you're just sending them back and forth. You're like, oh wow, this is really fast. Like, why isn't, why can't my wire transfer? Why do I have to wait for my bank to, why do I have to wait 2 days for a bank transfer to happen?
Yeah, it was fun kind of playing around with that one Banano faucet that I mentioned earlier and seeing every time I go on there because I've kept a tab open on my computer to go back whenever I remember,
Mm-hmm.
paste my receiving address in there and just watch it send, refresh my wallet and StackWallet, and then it's just there already. It is pretty cool. Well, Foss, is there anything you'd like to throw out there as far as where people might be able to follow you personally in anything that you're working on?
Yeah, so I keep a pretty up to date personal website. It's just foss.co, and it just like doubles as my resume, and I have a bunch of other just cool stuff that I do on there. Hardware hacking, um, and as well as like my software projects. Um, Also, I'm on Twitter, Reddit, the usual. And that's the username for that would be Fossephate. So it's a play on words of the chemical. It's Fosse, and then Phate.
And can I ask what inspired that name?
Um, well, just going by having gone by Foss for so long, people just throw out like nicknames, and some of them stuck, particularly in high school.
I see. All right. Well, so you were saying your handle on Twitter, Reddit is just at phosphate or
Yep.
u/phosphate,
Mhm.
Fossepphate.
Yep.
Okay. I will note that. I'll go ahead and put that in the description for whenever we release this too.
Nice.
All right, awesome. And then Nano links, best places to learn a little bit more about Nano.
Um, the best place for technical discussion is the Discord, and that's chat.nano.org, I believe. I'll have to double check. The best place to just learn, like to get like a general overview, there's a community member. His name is Senatus, and he publishes a lot of articles about Nano. And if you just look up like nanocurrency, uh, articles, like his name will come up, and he has published just a wealth of information um, about the crypto. Like honestly, his articles are really well written. He's not a super technical guy as far as I'm aware, but he talks to the technical members of the Discord. Like he fact checks all of his stuff, and so it's really well written content, and I'd recommend any of his articles really.
Great. Okay, good to know. And just general Nano socials.
Yeah, the main like the Nano Foundation website is like I think just nano.org. Their Twitter is just at nano. Um,
You just
those are the
got
two.
so they were able to actually get the handle at Nano.
Yeah.
Wow,
I
that's
don't I don't
impressive.
know. Yeah, I don't know how they got that, but they might maybe they bought it off of somebody,
I
or
was
maybe they
wondering.
just
That's impressive.
actually they had to because it's a 4 letter username, and it wasn't any earlier than 2015. Yeah, they definitely
Yeah,
had to like
those would
get
have
a
been
deal.
taken a long time ago, you would think.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I think that kind of covers everything. And uh, thank you so much for sitting down with us for just a little bit. Hasn't been too long, but I feel like we kind of covered everything that I was personally really curious about. So I appreciate your time,
Mhm.
and I'll let you get back to the rest of your day. Um, And for anyone that's curious about Nano, just check out the links that we'll go ahead and put in the description here. And you can go ahead and follow Fosse while you're at it. All right. And then we will see you again next week with another guest. Thanks again.